Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Well, and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have with us Dr. Steve Taubman, who is a best-selling author and world-class speaker on talking about issues about how to thrive through challenges. Steve, welcome to the program.
Mike, what a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You know, you're welcome, and I think it's really interesting that when we go right to your website and, people go to our website and they want to take a quick peek at just a 3-second look, and right here at the top is Zen and the Art of Thriving Under Pressure. And at the time of this recording, we're going through COVID situations with quarantines and social distancing, and I would say that is some pressure, and we need to learn how to thrive under it. And so I'm excited to talk about that as well as your new book, Bulletproof. So give us a little bit about your background, and then let's jump right into learning from your teachings.
Well, my background starts back in the days of my chiropractic practice. I had a very large holistic healthcare practice that emphasized sports medicine and helping people perform at high levels as well as to heal more quickly. So for a number of years, I ran the largest sports medicine practice in the state of Vermont and one of the largest in the nation. And when I sold my practice, I jumped from the body to the mind. And I started studying the way our minds work and what are the mental blocks that we encounter trying to achieve whatever we're trying to achieve, whether it's success or happiness or better health. And the principles of holistic health, it turns out, apply very nicely in the world of the mind. How do we get where we want to go when we encounter those, what I call invisible walls, those blocks that we hit as we try to get where we want to go? And what do we do about them?
Yeah, that's so huge. And I love how, you think about, well, I need to work on this area of my life, whatever that might be. But there's 3 or 4 or 5 or 7 other ones that play into that. So that holistic approach is so huge. And I think that your point and your whole teaching on the mindset is such a foundational point of it because, it's like what I'm sure I'll butcher the saying, but, Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. And it just really starts with that mindset.
Yeah.
I think I got it right.
That quote is one of the slides in one of my presentations, and I use it often. I also like to use the Einstein quote that says, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results.
Yes.
And if you look at the way most people live their lives, in a way, we end up like a rat in a maze where we start moving in a particular direction, and then we hit a wall, and then we turn, we go another way, and we hit a wall again, we turn another way, we hit the same wall. And the reality is that many of us are stuck inside of a box that keeps us from thriving, from getting to where we want to go. Because rather than looking at what you use the word foundational, rather than looking at the foundational principles of success, of happiness, of well-being, we're looking at the nuts and the bolts. I've got to do this. If I'm a salesperson, I've got to make this phone call. I've got to overcome this objection. All those things are important, but none of them take the place of doing the inner work, the foundational work, so that we know that regardless of what we encounter, whether it's on the outside or it's on our own heads, we've got the mental resilience to be able to move through it and keep going.
I feel like, and maybe this is something you really cover in the book, but just from what you said there with, where people are coming from and their own limitations, I feel like people don't really know what they don't really know. And it reminds me of the analogy of, and I know you've heard this before, but the elephant, when they're a really baby elephant, they put this little chain on them and tie them up to this post and, they can't move anywhere. Well, by the time they're 9,000 trillion tons, they could snap it like a piece of thread, but they just in their mind think that this thing's on my leg. I can't move past this, and it still works. And it's also like the frog in the water. Slowly but surely, outside, the heat turns up, and they never really notice it, and they boil to death. So I think that those analogies really brings to the point that a lot of people are just, stuck in their own mindset, and they don't really know where they could be. And if you were to ask them, they'd go, I'm fine. But really, if they were shown where some opportunities are to improve, it would open up their eyes to a whole new world. What do you see in your practice and in your speaking when people maybe allude to that?
Well, that was beautifully said. And you're right. I think most people are walking through life feeling it's just good enough. And of course, we say good is the enemy of great. We become comfortable, comfortably numb, and are uncomfortable with taking steps in the right direction. So what I find is that often people find me or resonate with my message if they see me on stage or read one of my books because they've gotten uncomfortable about being comfortable, right? It's just too many days of doing the same old on that hamster wheel, running the rat race. I don't feel happy. I don't feel fulfilled. I'm kind of bored with my life. I've got no real new challenges, but I'm not sure what's going to make it any better. And I don't want to make myself miserable while I go through change, but somehow I know that change is necessary for growth. I want to be better. I want to experience more. I want to be more passionate and vibrant and have a sense of purpose. But it's so comfortable here in my little rut.
Yeah. It's like who said it, Tony Robbins or somebody, you'll make change when you're sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Exactly. That's it. So unfortunately, it's difficult to get somebody to change until they're ready to do it. But there are enough people right now, and certainly in the world we're living in right now, who are either suffering as a result of direct or indirect aspects of the coronavirus, the physical part of it, the illness or the illness of family or friends, or the death of family or friends, or maybe they're affected more by the social implications and the fact that some people are being almost cavalier about the problem and other people are being very, intense about the problem. And so everybody's got their own point of view. So you're either struggling and suffering with the mental side of it, or you're struggling and suffering with the physical side of it. Yeah. But it's there, it's around you, and it's having an impact. And so what I'm bringing to the table is what I call calm on the battlefields of life. Being able to not only be calm, but also be masterful. Yeah, you are the eye of the storm. Now, this is something that's really easy to talk about, and everybody thinks they are that. But most of us aren't, as is evidenced by the number of people dying of heart disease. Right? We're a stressed out society, and nobody admits that they're one of them. But the reality is that to really be the calm in the eye of the storm requires a certain set of practices. It's not just something you think about. It's not just something that you pretend that you are. But it's something that requires a set of a commitment, an understanding, and a set of practices that lead you to a place where you truly experience yourself as the calm in the eye of the storm. And what does that look like?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So what does that look like?
Well, it looks like a feeling of peace. It looks like I can stay focused on what I'm trying to accomplish. It looks like I can embrace my passion rather than being obsessive. It means I've got a better sense of humor, and I have to take things lightly and enjoy things that maybe other people are getting irritated by, and maybe even things that I used to get irritated by. And it means that I develop a kind of superpower to be able to make connections with others because I have more compassion, more understanding. I'm less short-tempered. So there are millions of possible reasons why we want to achieve this state that we call resilience.
I think that's spot on. And I'm looking at the table of contents of your book, and something jumps out at me, or one of the first points that jumps out at me is chapter 3, start with happiness. And my mind jumps to, hold up. Isn't that where I'm ending up? I'm trying to get to happiness. What in the world do you start with happiness? Because I thought that if I make this change and do this and polish this, then I'm going to be happy. So what is the point with starting with happiness?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because it's a misunderstood concept and it takes a whole chapter to explain it. But, first and foremost, you're right that a lot of people think that happiness is at the end of the road toward achievement. So if I get the big house or the new car or the hot wife or whatever it is, then I'll be happy. And we make that mistake again and again throughout our entire lives. We get a little happy with our achievement, and then we get bored with it or irritated by it, and we go on to find something else that's going to then make us happy. So what if you were coming from a place of happiness as you moved through the process of achievement? The positive psychology studies now, Marty Seligman's work, basically proves to us that happiness is the cause of success, not the other way around. But the big misunderstanding, and this is one that it took me a long time to understand or to really wrap my head around, was that when you say somebody start with happiness, the first thing they think is, are you saying I should just put a smile on my face and be Pollyanna and act like everything's great? And or the way sometimes when you're feeling a little bit down, Mike, and somebody comes up to you and they just say, oh, come on, just cheer up, and you just want to punch them one. That's not what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
We're not talking about being happy right now, but we're talking about be aware of the level of happiness you're experiencing right now as a measure of whether or not you're working in the right direction inside of yourself. Okay. So it becomes the yardstick for whether or not you're moving in the right direction. So start with happiness means let's start with a commitment that happiness is something that I want to make primary before anything else.
And use that as your gauge as you move forward.
Exactly.
And chapter 6 is lean into the pressure. And I would venture to say that some people would go, I'm running from the pressure. What are you kidding me? There's pressure, there's stress. I'm out of here. So what does leaning into the pressure mean?
Well, most of us are raised without realizing it to spend our entire lives, as you said, running from pain and pressure.
Yeah.
It becomes what the Buddhists call aversion. Right? We live in a state of aversion. So things happen. We don't like the experience we have when those things happen. We feel something inside of ourselves that we don't like. And so what do? We either run from it physically or we run from it mentally, right? So we might go up into our heads or, if somebody irritated you and you're feeling bad inside, what you're typically going to try to do is to fight with that other person or try to convince them of why they're wrong and you're right. Because, if I can only get you to recognize what an idiot you are, and how smart I am, well, then problem solved. Yep. Of course, the problem is that never works because everybody thinks they're right. And nobody, for some reason, at least in my life, nobody has hardly ever decided after I've explained to them why they're wrong, has ever thanked me for that. So...
Well, I also love the word picture that it makes me think of when I see lean into, something, the pressure. It doesn't mean jump in with both feet off balance. It just means lean, which still means you got some control, you got some balance and stability, but you're leaning toward that so that you can make the best of it. So I think that was a neat way to phrase that, is leaning into it without, sprinting and going in with, eyes closed and jumping in with both feet, which could be rash.
Well said. Yeah. So again, everything that I talk about, and we always temper it with balance and with judgment. So nothing is all or nothing. It's an art and a science. But what lean into the pressure says to me is, what if I were to notice those moments when I'm feeling stress, pressure, suffering, anger, irritation? What if I were to notice those feelings inside of myself, and rather than trying to run from them by fixing a problem, what if I were able to just kind of embrace experience at a very physical level? Oh, this is what it feels like to be angry. This is what it feels like to be irritated. And I were to just be able to, what the Navy SEALs call, embrace the suck.
Yeah.
Right. So therefore, I'm not running away from the situation, but rather I'm learning how to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And if I could start getting comfortable without being uncomfortable, I will change my relationship between myself and my emotions. My emotions will cease to be those things that stop me from taking appropriate action.
Yeah, because, I know it sounds very cliche to say, but it is what it is. If you're in a situation that's not ideal, you can't change it. but you can change what you're doing within it. And I think that's kind of what we've been talking about here is, leaning into that and dealing with what we can deal with, because like right now, dealing with COVID that we're going through, what one person can wave a magic wand and change it? Nobody. So we've got to deal with it, lean into it, make the best of it, all of those things. But yeah, that's a really big piece is leaning into that pressure. And then when things lift, because they always do, this too shall pass, then when things become a little bit more ideal, then now that happiness starts to really amplify that much more.
Absolutely. Please said.
So you also talk about assemble your lifeboats. So let's talk a little bit about that, because I think that's got a lot of meat in that, just even reading the title.
Yeah, well, one of the things that we who are on that kind of path toward greater awareness and higher consciousness have to realize is that we don't start out completely enlightened or completely impervious to irritation and stress, right? We want to be there. We're trying to move in that direction. However, it's a question of necessary strength. When you get into that situation where you have no control over the outcome, and there's a part of you that's going to want to run from it or do whatever you used to do, take the low road, so to speak. And there's another part of you that wants to take the high road and use this negative experience as maybe a crucible to rise above your typical habitual patterns of feeling like a victim, for example. Yeah. In that moment, you are actually in a tug of war inside of yourself. Do I take the high road or do I take the low road? Do I get upset and irritated and yell about this? Do I go into my victim place? Or do I say, I'm going to stand apart from it. I'm going to reframe it as something that actually has value, like a lot of people are doing now with the virus. Is like, what are the positives? What are we getting out of this very strange time in history? How are we going to come out better rather than worse? So in that moment, when I have the choice of going down the high road or going down the low road, it becomes a question of necessary strength. Am I going to collapse into the way I've always done it because that's the easy road, or am I going to be strong enough to take the high road? And at that moment, if I don't have the necessary strength to take the high road, that's where assemble your lifeboats comes in, which basically means that we recognize that we're not all as enlightened as we'd like to be. And at those moments when we're really having a difficult time, it's almost like we're drowning in our own emotions, right? We're floundering in this situation. And if you're floundering in a situation, you're drowning in your emotions, what you want is a lifeboat. You want something that's going to pull you out. And when you don't have the necessary strength to swim out of that place, the lifeboats are the systems and the people that help you to take the high road, that guide you to the high road. They are your mentors, they're your coaches. They're the close friends you have who understand how to deal with your negativity when you're feeling it. Rather than help feed into it, they help you witness it. They help you sort of get a perspective on it.
And when you need them, which is like what you just said, is when you need to make that decision to take the high road, and there they are, that gives me the connotation that you have already cultivated those relationships. You're not now going, wow, I need help. Let me go search and find and develop. These people, these resources and lifeboats, as you call them, are already there. And if you need to assemble your lifeboats, that's done way before you actually need them. So I think that's the pre-planning, and it kind of makes me think of if you're on a diet and you don't want to eat bad foods, then don't go shopping for your weekly groceries when you're starving. You're going to buy things that might not be the best for you. So I like that concept of assemble the lifeboats with the perspective of doing it ahead of time before you need it so that you're prepared.
That's one of the insights we talk about in the book, is that whole initial preparation. That's why we assemble them first. It's like you can't, assemble a boat while you're drowning, right? Yep. The boat has to be there. Too late. It's so much more comforting when you know that there is a lifeboat, that there is something that you can reach out to, whether it be a person or a system, as you said, like using the shopping example. I think of Chip and Dan Heath's wonderful book, Switch, where they talk about the elephant, the rider, and the path. They say that making changes in your life, you've got to look at this metaphor that, there's the rider on the elephant is your conscious mind that says, I want to stop eating bad food. And the elephant is your subconscious mind that's like, I'm just going to keep eating is whatever I feel like eating because it's what I like to do. And it's much bigger than the person on top of the elephant, right? So that's your subconscious. And then the path is, if you're a skilled rider and you're trying to move an elephant from point A to point B, you'd be much wiser to take that elephant down a path that's not like let's say a peanut farm, where the elephant's going to stop every 2 seconds and eat the peanuts. So right. You create the path, which is the metaphor we're using for, fill your refrigerator with healthy food. Don't go out shopping while you're hungry. Use smaller plates. So all the things that would automatically lead you to do the right thing, set it up that way in advance.
And then that makes the decision that much easier because you're doing it from a point of calm, not reacting to something that's right there in front of you. So you've assembled those lifeboats and you've kind of done that mental rehearsal of when this happens, if this happens, then I will do this. And then it's like, oh, okay, I knew that was coming.
Exactly. It's like the. I'm a private pilot. If something goes wrong while I'm flying my plane, I immediately pull down the visor and there's a checklist. Yeah. First check this, then check that. You don't rely on yourself in those moments of stress to do the right thing. You've got a plan.
Well, let's wrap up, Steve, with this question. Like we talked about earlier, a lot of times people don't know what they don't know. So a lot of times people are just, going, I guess I'm just fine. So what are some things that someone might be unaware of? But then if you could say, well, here's a trigger or here's a thought. If this is going on or if that is going on, then this might be a great opportunity for you to reach out and connect and pick up a copy of my book, because Bulletproof would be a great help for you. So what are some of those? And then what is the best way people can pick up a copy of your book?
Well, first of all, in terms of getting a better, more objective sense of where you stand on the continuum, I've got a quiz on my website called the Mindfulness Assessment. Mm-hmm. Mindfulness, of course, is this combination of awareness and non-judgmental awareness and equanimity. Where do you stand? And in that quiz, you'll be asked questions like, how often do you get irritated or angry? Do you experience anxiety? Do you find yourself hitting the same walls again and again? Are some of your relationships patterned so that they look just like the last relationship? These are all the kinds of things that are signposts that maybe you're not operating at the highest level of consciousness, and there's work to be done. If that's you, then absolutely start looking for resources. My book being, I think, one of the better ones right now. So the book Bulletproof, for those who want to kind of dip their toes in the water and maybe try before they buy, I've got a website that's bestofsteve.com. And if you go to bestofsteve.com, it's just a landing page where you put in your email address and you'll be admitted to my weekly wisdom tips. I send out, some of the kinds of things that you and I have been talking about today, and just inspire people throughout their week. And then it'll also give you a free digital download of the first chapter of Bulletproof. So if you like it, then you could get it on Amazon, but at least you'll have an opportunity to check it out first.
Perfect. Well, Steve, thank you so much for that, and thank you also for coming on and talking through some of these great concepts. It was really good getting to know you.
Yeah, this has been great, Mike. I really appreciated it. We've definitely, obviously, been considering some of the same concepts, which is wonderful.
Yes.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneurssradio.com.